recently we got a look at the new Overwatch effectively. Blizzard has decided to revamp Overwatch in a major way. In this video, I'm going to take a look at the 10 characters that we're getting this year. Now, 5 have been announced. 1 is playable right now. The other 4, we got a little bit of an overview and a deep dive on their kits that we can look at, and we have all the information on them because they're coming in just a few days when Season 1 drops on February 10th. The other 5, however, we only have a black silhouette to go by. And I'm going to look over those silhouettes and we're going to see how much information we can glean from that and maybe educated guess our way around what those characters might be and what their kit's going to look like. Anyways, let's dive into the ones we know about right now and we'll get to the mystery ones a little bit later. So first up, we have Domina. She is a tank and she is the heiress vice president of Viscar Industries. Now, though Domina is not a formal member of Talon, she does have a partnership with Vendetta, and she's kind of granted Viscar Industries a lucrative redevelopment rights for territories that are under Talon's control. She uses advanced Viscar technology, and she is the first true poke tank since Sigma, which means she's basically a medium to long range tank that tries to control the grounds while protecting her team. So her primary fire is actually going to be called Photon Magnum, and it is a medium range beam that culminates in a high impact shot. This looks like a pretty interesting take on something like Zarya's beam rifle and seems kind of fun to use along with the rest of her kit. So her first ability is called Barrier Array. This is a segmented hard light barrier that's deployed in front of Domina. Cool thing here is that each segment must be individually destroyed. So unlike most barriers in the game that just have a solitary life bar, once you deplete that life bar, the barrier is gone. This one you see actually is in multiple square fragments. So you'll see Soldier 76 right here shoot at the barrier and it slowly breaks down each individual chunk of the barrier as opposed to the whole barrier at once. So that's a cool little detail and it differentiates her shield kit from other tanks in the game. Next up, we have Crystal Charge. This is simply a explosive projectile crystal. You send it flying out in front of you and you reactivate the ability, exploding and dealing damage around it. Next up, she has her Sonic Repulsors. This is just a simple knockback, but if the enemy hits a wall, it does actually stun them. So I could see you kind of applying this in a way where you push up on an enemy, use the repulsors, stun them against a wall, and then either you or a friendly hero come in and try to finish the job or deal some good damage. It might be really good against another tank where you're trying to kind of slow them down and deal some damage quickly without getting in too much trouble. Then we have her passive, which is called Reconstruction, and dealing damage with her abilities actually restores her shields. And finally, we have her ultimate, and this is called Panopticon, and this is pretty interesting. This actually kind of flips the whole shield barrier thing on its head, and instead of protecting you, actually encases the enemies in a hard light barrier, which then explode once they expire. So you'll encase the enemies in kind of this shielded barrier, and then those shielded barriers explode, dealing damage to all enemies that were encased in them. Now, side note, along with all these new characters, they actually announced sub-roles that fit into the tank damage and support overall roles, and each sub-role gives you a slightly different ability or passive. So Domina actually fits in as a stalwart tank, meaning that she reduces knockbacks and slows received. So overall, Domina looks like a pretty fun tank. I don't really vibe with this rich tech CEO thing. I mean, I don't think she's meant to be likable, but her kit seems fun to play with, and I will be trying her out on the 10th for sure. All right, moving on, we have Omre. He is a damage hero who is aligned with Vendetta and Talon. It says Omre is a former member of Overwatch Strike Team, and he once stood as an example of Overwatch's ideals. But as Overwatch lost sight of its mission, Omre chose to leave. But now recently, Freya has tracked him down and discovered that his body has been altered with a bunch of cybernetic modifications. Very Gray Fox or Raiden coded. His mind appears to be in conflict. Sometimes he behaves like the person that he once was, and sometimes he's kind of distant. And under the new sub-role system, Omre is a specialist DPS, meaning that when he eliminates enemies, it will briefly increase his reload speed. So Omre's primary weapon is pretty simple. It's a burst rifle. It's a simple 3-round burst. Nothing too fancy there. Just a classic, good old 3-round burst weapon. It does have the ability to ADS, so your secondary fire zooms in, it of course tightens your accuracy, and it actually increases your damage fall off range. So you get full damage a little further out to kind of take shots at a greater distance than you could have without using ADS. His first ability is called Siphon Blaster, which basically summons a semi-automatic pistol that fires life-stealing explosive rounds. It allows him to move faster and jump higher as well while he is wielding the Siphon Blaster. Next up, he has the Cyber Frag, which is a frag grenade. You throw it, it bounces, and explodes. Very self-explanatory, typical frag grenade. Then his passive is called Altered Vitals. He actually has an increased rate of passive health regeneration that activates sooner, and when it activates, it instantly restores 30 health. Then, of course, we have his ultimate, which is Override Protocol. An override initiates, transforming him into a living weapon. It fires rapid explosive blasts or charged mega shots capable of wiping teams. This kind of reminds me of Pharah's Missile Barrage, but in a much more focused, controlled manner. And lastly, for the new heroes joining Talon, we have Mizuki. Mizuki is a support, and they are a member of Japan's Hashimoto clan, which are aligned with Talon. He has endured years of misfortune and pressure within the clan's hierarchy. Some members of the clan believe that he is not suited for the life that he's been raised into, but with thorough dedication and influence from senior clan members, he has become a key player in the Hashimoto clan. Mizuki has been tasked with infiltrating this band of miscreants called the Yokai and Kanekaza, but there is a concern by some within the clan that he may be influenced by the Yokai or potentially drawn to Overwatch. So it sounds like he kind of has a moral conflict inside him where he wants to do good, but he also has this obligation to the clan that raised him and brought him in. So that's going to probably play a role in the narrative structure moving forward if I was a betting man. Anyway, his primary weapon is the Spirit Glaive. Now this is a spinning blade that can bounce off walls, and as it impacts enemies, it rapidly deals damage. His first ability is called Healing Kasa. You throw your hat Kung Lao style at an ally of your choice, and then it bounces around between allies in the nearby area, eventually returning to you and dealing some healing to yourself on return. His next up, he has Katashiro Return, where he leaps forward and leaves behind a little paper doll. Now, this is basically a recall ability, allowing Mizuki to effectively push into some more treacherous situations and kind of push the fight forward, all while being able to recall to a safe spot if things get a little too hairy. His next ability is Binding Chain, and this one was a little weird. I'm not quite sure how to use this one. It showed him kind of binding Doomfist, and it seemed like maybe pulling him out of his ult. Now his passive is called Remedy Aura, so he actually primarily heals through a aura or a ring around him, very similar to Lucio. But whereas Lucio kind of always has the ring around him that does healing or speed that can be amplified, Mizuki has a ring around him that he amplifies through dealing damage and using abilities. So it heals nearby allies, and it scales with resources that he generates by dealing damage and healing. His ultimate is Kakai Sanctuary. It creates a sanctuary that heals allies and absorbs enemy projectiles from outside the area. This basically creates a sanctuary area that heals all the allies inside and absorbs all enemy projectiles from outside shooting in. So far Mizuki looks like a really fun support. He's definitely more of an action-oriented damage style support, which is always fun. And he kind of represents a cool narrative beat there, which I'm interested to follow. Out of everybody they showed today, Mizuki's kind of background and lore really piqued my interest more than anybody else, where he's kind of got this moral dilemma within him. And we'll try to see over time if he's going to head to Overwatch or stay with Talon or be a double agent, and kind of where is he going to go. All right, next up we have our first hero joining Overwatch. Now, Hanran is a damage hero that is actually in the game right now to try, and I have played her, and she's pretty fun. Now, under the new sub-role system, Hanran is a flanker DPS, which means that health packs restore more health. Very simple to understand. As you get health packs, you get more health. Now, Hanran is the older sister of Wu Yang, which is already a character in the game, and she harnesses the power of fire through her Zook fans. She is confident and hardworking and holds others to the standards that she maintains for herself. She joins Overwatch with the intent to save the world and keep her brother Wu Yang out of trouble. So her primary weapon is going to be called the Zook fans. And before I tell you about her fans and her abilities, let's just jump into her passive, because that's going to put everything in perspective. So her passive is called Ignition. And as you hit enemies, you'll notice that you're kind of building up this meter. And once you fill the meter, it procs this status effect called Ignition that basically catches enemies on fire and dealing a damage over time effect. So her Zook fans apply this, and almost everything in her kit applies this Ignition status effect. So her Zook fans are hand fans that shoot fiery projectiles. Her secondary fire is called Fan to Flames, and this is kind of a hot wind blast that amplifies burning damage. So once they are on fire, if you fan the flames, it kind of boosts the damage output of that Ignition status effect. Then she has Inferno Rush, which is basically a fiery dash. It propels yourself forward, damaging enemies as you impact them. It has a small knockback and some movement potential to it, so it's kind of a movement tech, an ability, a way to apply Ignition, and a little bit of knockback. It's kind of a multifaceted ability there. Next up, we have Dancing Blaze, which allows you to strike nearby enemies while dodging all damage. And basically, you turn into a little orb of fire and ping between enemies around you, dealing ignition and fire damage, and you can't be damaged while you're in this little orb of fire state, which means that it's a good way to escape an oncoming ultimate, or just kind of get out of damage if you're getting pushed hot and heavy, and try to get out of there, all while dealing a little bit of damage yourself and applying Ignition. And then we have her ultimate, which actually comes in two flavors. First off, we have Vermilion Ascent. Now, this allows you to kind of jump in the air and dive back down, exploding on impact and dealing this kind of huge AoE effect that instantly applies Ignition to all enemies caught within the range. And then we have another way to use her ultimate, which is called Vermilion Revival. So if you have your ultimate available and you die, you can activate it, which revives yourself in a giant fiery explosion, which, you guessed it, applies Ignition on enemies. So her whole kit is kind of really about zooming around, applying this fire DOT status effect called Ignition, fanning the flames, and really dealing massive damage through this Ignition status effect. Everything she does is kind of in service of catching enemies on fire and then fanning the flames to boost that damage. And then lastly, we have the character that is going to be everybody's meme lord favorite. We have Jetpack Cat. Jetpack Cat is a support joining Overwatch. Found as a stray in Gibraltar, little is known about Jetpack Cat other than how dangerous she is in fights, with quick reflexes and a kit befitting a feline hero. Now, Jetpack Cat is definitely Overwatch's way of saying, hey, we know everybody likes Jeff from Marvel Rivals. We have a cool animal character too. But it worked. Jetpack Cat's adorable and looks like a lot of fun. I'm going to play the shit out of Jetpack Cat. All right, Jetpack Cat is great and she can do no wrong and everybody can die right now if you don't like it. So Jetpack Cat's passive is Jetpack. She's permanently flying. She's a Jetpack Cat and she flies. That's what she does. That's her passive. Her primary attack is also called Biotic Projectiles. Adorable. It's a mid-range projectile spread that heals allies and damages enemies. Now, her kit is honestly pretty unique to Overwatch, but it's very similar to Jeff from Marvel Rivals, actually. So she has Lifeline, which she toggles into transport mode, which allows any ally to be towed and increases the movement speed and heals of your ally. So if you have a slow-moving tank like Reinhardt, for example, you can actually pick them up and rush them to the front lines, giving them some heals, a boost of speed, and dropping them off right on the front, right where they need to be. Next up, she has Frenetic Flight, which is basically just a speed boost, allowing you to accelerate in any direction. And you can also do this while carrying allies, but it is going to slow the recovery of the ability. Then we have Purr, which basically the cat purrs and it pulses an area heal, which increases in frequency over time, and it knocks back enemies that are nearby. Then we have her ultimate, which is very, very Jeff the Shark coded. It's called Catnapper. She dives towards a ground location, knocking down enemies and tethering the enemy that is nearest to you. You then pick them up, fly them wherever you want them to go before dropping them off. Anyway, so that is the characters that we know about. That's who we've seen, and those are the 5 that are actually coming in just a few days on the 10th when this whole revamped Overwatch thing takes off. But we did get a brief teaser of the other 5 characters that are coming throughout the year. So let's look at that and see if we can glean any little bits of details that'll give us a hint over what these guys actually are. All right, so we have this image that is kind of all 10 of the heroes coming in 2026. We see the 5 that we just went over, and we see 5 more silhouettes. Let's start left to right and go over what I think these heroes are. So over here on the left, we kind of have this character that looks very similar to Mizuki. So it's safe to assume that maybe they're a part of the Hashimoto clan, but if we look at their feet, it looks very robotic, making me think that this might be an Omnyx character. So we might have an Omnyx, and if we look at their weapon, it's kind of this tether, but looks to be a scythe on the end, which makes me think that their weapon might be a Kasarigama. Whatever, however you pronounce that. The scythe on the end weapon, the Kasarigama thing. You know, you spin it around, there you go. That's what I think this character is going to be, an Omnyx with the Kasarigama that may be a member of the Hashimoto clan. Next up, we have this gigantic looking mech suit. You can kind of see robotic toes and giant pauldrons, which makes me think this is either a wrecking ball situation where it is a smaller character inside a giant mech, either a giant Omnyx Orisa style. I kind of think it would be cool if they gave Talon a Reinhardt counterpart that's just this giant burly character. So we don't really have much detail other than it's safe to assume that this character is probably a tank. I mean, if they made him like a support or a DPS, I guess that would be different, but my money's on tank and it being kind of a giant mech suit. Now, moving on, we have probably the most vague of the silhouettes. We got this kind of feminine looking character that seems like she has some equipment around her waist, which kind of makes me lean towards thinking there may be a support character. We can see what looks to be horns on their head, whether this is a mask or just part of their character features. I do not know. But our one big detail here to how they're going to play is in their right hand, kind of behind Mizuki's head, and it is this big pistol. It kind of looks like a Desert Eagle with the dovetail here. It could be a revolver, but it almost looks like a Desert Eagle with almost a blade mounted at the bottom. So it's safe to assume that they're going to be using some kind of giant pistol as a weapon. Anyway, moving on, we have what is definitely an Omnyx with this face here. You can see their eyes. That is definitely an Omnyx, and it looks like it's either a detective or in Western wear. Now, considering we already have a ton of Western themed characters in the game, well, not a ton, but quite a few Western themed characters in the game, I am leaning towards this being like a PI/detective style Omnyx character. Almost reminiscent of like Nick Valentine from Fallout 4. I think this is going to be like a detective Omnyx that's probably like a support class, maybe doing some recon, and you know, that's kind of my take on this guy. Now, lastly, we have this Cammy from Street Fighter looking silhouette, and she definitely has a commando vibe. It seems very feminine. Seems like they're wearing a beret. They have hair all the way down to the floor. So I'm going by this is a girl commando character. She's holding a gigantic gun in her right hand that literally almost stretches from her hips down to her toes. So seems like she's using a giant gun, and it seems like this drone goes with her. Now, this drone could go with this Omnyx detective back here, but if you see, this detective character is kind of grayed out in the background, and this character in the foreground is a much darker black, which matches the darker black of the drone. So I think she has this giant gun and this drone. Whether that means that she's going to use the drone for support, she could be a tank, like that drone could kind of deploy shields, or it just could be a straight damage drone and do DPS. This could kind of go any direction. So out of all the classes, I'm not sure where to put her. I would say DPS, but I think it would be cool to kind of have this smaller tank that uses her gun and robotics to do tank things. So this drone could it could do recon, it could do damage, but it would be cool if it kind of deployed shields along with maybe this gun that could be something other than a giant cannon. It could be like a goo gun. What if you could like lay down big, like chunky, like foam balls or goo balls, kind of like the foam gun in the finals, and then your drone deployed shields? I'm getting a little creative here. I have no evidence to support this, but I think that would be cool. So that's a look at all the characters that they announced coming to Overwatch in 2026. 10 total. Again, the 5 that we're getting on February 10th. And the 5 other ones that we're getting throughout the rest of the year, and what I think those mysterious silhouettes could be. So kudos to them for that. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and appreciate you listening to me ramble on about it for a little bit. Have a good one.